So thank you so much for joining. So I'm on with Jesse Herriott, who is the leader of Unity of Birmingham. I'm super excited to get your insights and your background and your experience, not only from your personal experience, but you also work with so many people who have gone through some wild things, I'm sure. And you've probably heard a lot of experiences. So you have like a bird's eye view, I think, about what this experience can look like and how it can disrupt our lives, but also for the better. So I'm really excited to hear your insights. And like I said, I just want to start from the spiritual seeker side, and then we'll transition to, as a light worker and how you're presenting light and love into the world.
Okay.
All right, so the first question is, think back to the moment when you first realized you were going through a spiritual awakening. What were you feeling, and what was the first thing you did after that realization?
That's a big question. I think for me, it was probably at the transition of my uncle. I was 8 years old, and we were close, and he was the guy, the cool one in the family, and he died so suddenly and tragically. I think he was in early 40s. Showed everybody how to dress, hair, skin, took you to all the cool barbershops, music. He traveled all over the world, was in Washington, worked for the government. I mean, Michael was the rock star, and it kind of rocked me. And I watched him battle his ailment and then watched his body change. And it was the first time I had ever been that close to death, although other people had died in the family. And I can remember maybe a couple weeks after he died, they asked him, "Michael, how are you doing?" And of course, he was in pain and had the morphine and all of that other stuff. So my 8-year-old mind could kind of pick up on that. And his response was the thing I think that triggered me. He said, "I'm at peace."
Mm.
It was weird because he had gotten down to about 80 something pounds, I think. And he wasn't the Michael that I remember, but I could see his mind and his intelligence was still there. And so after his transition, I want to say maybe like a year into that, I had this dream, like this lucid awakening dream. And it was just this deep calling where I felt like this voice was calling me into something to work with people, to lead, giving me instructions, all that other stuff. And I didn't know what any of that means. So I turned to the faith traditions, and Christianity was the tradition of my upbringing, and just all of those various changes, and let my mom into various forms of spiritual practices and churches. But the ministers there, because they saw the depth of that calling, and I would always tell them about those dreams, it opened up an early platform for me. So by the time I was 11 years old, I was going through a different form of catechism and schooling. And by the time I was 12, I was ordained. I was 12-year-old ordained minister, the youngest in my town, the youngest in my city. They did the whole newspaper thing, and there were cameras. And so back in those days, I call them the old days. They called it your trial sermon, because they would try you to see if your calling was actually sure.
Sure.
And so after teaching and all of that other stuff, without any sort of formal training, just informal in-house from whoever the minister was that had went to seminary, they saw that I had a knack for what's called exegesis. It's just looking at sacred literature, looking at where it comes from, the history, the culture, some of the original languages. So I could remember my mom taking me to the bookstore and getting my Strong's Concordance. And when I saw that Strong Concordance in Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic, my mind was blown. And that was the beginning of my journey. We went, I think the original church where I ministered at, because I eventually became the youth pastor at 12, and then the minister would go out of town and I'd preach in their stead and raise the offering and work with admin, and still had to wake up and catch the school bus at 7 because I was in middle school, like 7th grade. So it was weird. So I was the kid in middle school who was the minister. And then on Sundays, I'd be dressed in civic attire, black with the tiny collar. And so it was an interesting experience. And then I was reordained at 14, because I had gotten older by that time, and I realized that, it was changing because life was changing. And so I recommitted and re-explored and had that same experience. A lot of my earliest memories are just through my dream life. Like something was calling me. What Carl Jung talked about, just the process of individuation, like something almost older than me was pulling me.
Yes.
And then I discovered not too long after my 14th birthday that the same kind of drive and calling was on the life of my Uncle Michael. He just never had a chance to fulfill it because he was in his late 30s when he started having these experiences that I knew about. And various ministers would kind of urge him to seminary. And he would fight it and resist it because he wanted to, enjoy his life. And he was like, oh, I think about it. And then right around the time he got his mind ready to sort of enter into seminary, that's when he received his diagnosis, but, it was towards the end. But I kind of felt almost a responsibility, like I was picking up his mantle almost. So it intensified my calling, my own individual journey, plus picking up the mantle of someone who was an uncle / like father, because him and my mother were the closest out of all their siblings. And that was the beginning of my journey, which led me down a long winding path of people and pulpits all over the South and high school and still ministry. And ministry, I think, has been my longest relationship.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I mean, if you started that young, of course it is. Okay, so this is really intriguing because I did not realize it goes back that far. So tell me about like that transition from being raised in Christianity to where you are now. Like, did you have support, or like what did that look like as far as coming to terms with a different belief system than being raised strictly Christianity? Or you could even tell me, what your beliefs are now in relation to Christianity and how that's adjusted. But really, I kind of want to know about like that change or that shift in your belief system and how you, it came to embody it despite like the conditioning and the rules that we're raised with.
Yeah. So the interesting thing for me is, as an African American, I don't want to say many, but some were drawn to some of the more mystical aspects of Christianity. So we were accustomed to what we would call prophets, or individuals that were divinely inspired, whether you call it cold reading if you're secular, or intuitive callings. I mean, they were amazing, like almost scary. Like they could tell you what you have for breakfast. And I was always mesmerized by them. And so I was raised around that in the charismatic Pentecostal tradition, and around all of these people who were quote unquote prophets. And what was also interesting is there was this celebrity piece that was attached to them too, because many of the more popular gospel singers today, I had a chance to meet them when I was a kid, and they would grab me whenever they would come to teach and throw me on the pulpit with them. So as they are teaching, they're carrying me around the pulpit, literally dragging me and making me what we used to call the armor bearer. And so all of those experiences, fast forward, I ended up in college, and college blew my mind. And that's when I really, really remember those anthropology classes looking at Christianity being about 2,000 years old, Judaism about 5, Hinduism, and so on and so forth, and looking at it historically and coming across John Dominic Crossan's work and Matthew Fox and then John Shelby Spong when I was 21, and it changed me. It blew my mind. And that was when I started to ask those deep questions, the questions that I could see that these mystical people had in my circle, but they wouldn't say publicly because it would affect attendance and tithes and offerings. So they would talk about this stuff privately, but not publicly because
Mhm.
they were afraid. They were afraid, I probably should say, of going to hell, their conception of hell.
Right.
But they couldn't knock their experiences. So they were just called weirdos and mystics. And that was when I started to have the change, because I was like, I don't want to hide this stuff. Plus, it's academic. It's right there. I mean, you can't knock it. I like the fact that there was scholarship concerning the possible historical Jesus. And then I like the fact that there were individuals like D.M. Murdoch, who I came across at 21, who's no longer with us, who talked about Jesus being a mythical person or a mythical hero. I can't think of the name of her work, but her pen name was Acharya S. And her and people like Peter Gandy and Tim Free, who wrote the Jesus Mysteries. I came across all that stuff in college at 21. But it wasn't just that. I explored various aspects of Catholicism. I would go to services that were different, just so that I could get a real picture of everything. And that's when I really started to have that deeper exploration. And I ran across Fillmore, and I ran across Ernest Holmes and Troward and Quimby and all of those folks, along with Emily Dickinson and the Transcendental Movement and Thoreau and Walt Whitman. So I had a huge education because at USC, one of the cool things about their library is it was in the basement. So you got the Carl Jung symbolism there. So I would spend the night in the stacks. I do what I could to finish my work and classwork and all that stuff, just so I can get the books that I typically didn't have access to. And one of the books that really changed me was the Zohar. I came across it going through the stacks, and I was like, let me go in the Judaic section. And I found the Book of Splendor, the Zohar, and Kabbalah, and all the mystical traditions. And I checked the book out, and what I would do is I would hide it so that other people wouldn't get it. So I'd check it out and put it in weird sections of the stacks so that nobody could find it. And I would spend days just consuming it, looking at all the different, all the different mystics from the 2nd and 3rd century, Rabbi Meir's commentary, and all of those. So that stuff as a whole changed me. The pain point happened early on, but after about 2021 in college, I can't find a specific point, because everything happened sort of all at once. And it was just back to back to back to back. And my love for books is what really sort of drove all of that intensity. And the cool thing is, it helped me because by that time I was really, really interested in education and higher education. So it was all like, oh, I get to kind of do this, and it gives me some credits because I'm kind of studying-esque. So I got the academic stuff for it, and I got the personal stuff for it. And that's what really changed me. And before I knew it, I was in Atlanta at 24. I had been ordained again through a different movement called the Universal Anglican Church. They're now called the UAIC. I was ordained as an interspiritual priest, looking at the works of B. Griffins and so many of those mystics who were priests, but also drawn to the Hindu tradition. And I came across an individual named Craig Berglund, who's still a dear friend and mentor today, who really sort of guided me into deeper aspects of the interspirituality of all of this stuff, which is a little bit different than interfaith, because with interspiritual practices, you actually get to engage and practice what Thomas More called a religion of one's own. So you sort of touch all of these different traditions, and you're not really locked into any one of them. And somebody like me, I mean, that spoke to me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
People who have more, just one path, but I wanted everything all at once. And so that kind of helped to really, really, really shape me. So I don't know, that might have been my 3rd, 4th, or 5th ordination. I don't even remember anymore at this point. But all of that stuff. Yeah. But I pick a turning point. It was college when I moved away and got access to USC's library all at once. It
Yeah,
just,
and it's funny you mentioned that the library was in the basement, because I go to therapy.
hmm
Admittedly, working on myself as we all should. Um,
hmm
but there was one point where I mentioned about something that happened in a basement, and I was like, oh wow, and I'm going into the basement of my shadows here too. Like,
hmm
going down low into all those deep feelings, and it just happened to physically represent in a basement as well. And it's like, wow, that's the symbolism of that is just, you can't ignore it.
Oh yeah,
So,
all of
yeah.
that's the unconscious. It is, and later on, I realized all of that was just a metaphor from my own mind. That I could have it. I could have as much as I want to, and it wasn't for teaching purposes. It was really for me. The teaching aspect came later on, but it was just me and my journey. And even now, as a teacher, um, the work is still personal. The
Mm.
fact that you share it is a plus, but if I didn't have opportunities to teach, I would still be doing this just for my own personal edification. One, because I'm a nerd, I love it. And then two, because of the spiritual connotations with it. I see its applications in my regular everyday life.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes. The more you dive in, the more you want to know. And then the more you see how it's all happening the way you're finding out about it. And it's magical.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So talk to me about, because your journey was very, sounds like solo exploration, which a lot of, spiritual awakenings or journeys like this are, a very alone type of experience.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are times where we need to seek out, assistance.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like most of your assistance was through books and reading and having your own interpretation of what you were reading. But did you ever seek out mentorship or, Lightworker practitioners, which that's what they're called now. That's not what they were called then, but like
Mm-hmm.
people who could guide you in this mysticism, and what did that look like as far as reaching out to them? And, how did you determine how you would work with people?
Yeah. There were teachers along the way. It's like the hero's journey. You meet sometimes you meet a teacher or maybe one or two, or like in the Buddhist tradition, you have your root teacher. And then I had several, like, DM Murdoch was hugely influential. I mean, the fact that she transitioned on the winter solstice is still like with me. But she gave me access to everything, and her information was sort of on the surface, but also underground, because there were many people who were using her work, but not necessarily referencing her, because she was sort of autodidactic, had done the work at the level of the academy, but didn't complete a PhD. So she worked outside of the academy. So all of her work on the Jesus mysteries and Jesus as a solar deity and the interconnectedness between all of the traditions and Greek mythology and all of that, she had done that stuff for years. So she was an amazing teacher. We communicated a lot via email because she was always busy. Craig Berglund, a dear friend and teacher of mine. I mean, he came along when I was, like I said, in my early 20s. He's still with me today. There were so many. John Shelby Spong, Bishop Spong. So when I was 23, I don't think I had started publicly teaching yet. I decided to reach out to Unity headquarters. And at the time, the director of programming had something called Unity.fm. Which eventually became Unity Online Radio. And they had a radio station and an internet radio station that traveled, it spanned all across the world. And there were all these wonderful teachers that were on there who I had listened to and loved. But I was sort of trying to find myself in the world. And I couldn't quite find a person. I started finding bits and pieces in everybody, which made more sense to me. So I just kind of followed my own calling. They actually gave me a shot to host a radio show at 23, 24 years old. So at 23, I was the host of a show on Unity Online Radio called Living on Purpose. And with that show, my goal was to use it as a grad school platform. I was going to reach out to all of the teachers that I could find from around the world, share it with the world, but also get a chance to learn.
Yes.
So Bishop John Shelby Spong, I mean, was amazing. I think I interviewed him like 4 times. Powerful teacher. If I could pick a singular root teacher outside of Bishop Craig, it would probably be Bishop John Shelby Spong, who really gave me the history of, you know, Christianity in the West and in the East and all of this other stuff, because he wrote tons and tons of books. But the funny thing is, out of all of my interactions with Bishop Spong, the thing that I remember most is his wife saying, "Jack, you forgot to eat your beans and toast." So I was interviewing.
Reminding us that we're all human.
Yeah, like 5 minutes before we're supposed to go live, his wife yells out, "Jack, you forgot to eat your beans and toast." And so he's like, "Hold on, Jesse, I gotta go." So he puts me on hold, so I have to kind of talk. Then he goes and has breakfast with his wife and then comes back and says, "Sorry about that." And then goes right into like taking me to school, literally. And luckily for me, Unity allowed me to, once the show went off air after about 2 years, take those podcasts and then put them online. So they're available online.
Okay.
But John Shelby Spong was a teacher of mine. John Dominic Crossan, almost everybody on that I interviewed. Howard Falco was a powerful teacher of mine who wrote the book I Am and a couple other books. Oh man.
Now, did you, okay, because these are all primarily, like, I guess I would call them knowledge workers. Like they are, you know, like you, they're just capturing all this knowledge and then, you know, putting it back out. Did you ever seek out any kind of mystics or energy healers or someone to help you with your chakras or anything in the I mean, I don't know if I call it the traditional sense of what a light worker practitioner is now, but anyway, did you ever seek out anyone, maybe not so much in the knowledge capturing mentorship and more on the like energy work side?
For the energy work side, not really. Only because I learned quickly on that my calling was knowledge. So for me, the not so much the brain stuff, but the book stuff was my thing. And I was able to make connections in history and look at Thoth in Greek or Tahuti in Egypt. And all of these symbols of knowledge keepers and scribes and writers all throughout history, and that was their thing. And so it eventually dawned on me that this was mine. And so although all of that stuff was there, what really drew me was the knowledge. So I explored a lot of those paths, but none of them really stuck with me like books. Like as boring as it is, they gave me so much light. I mean, i.e. the Zohar, the Book of Splendor, is called the Book of Light. And so I was able to find light just in books. And I did Ismail Lagardian, who isn't really a religious teacher. He is a political economist. When I was in college, just the light from his knowledge concerning administration and politics and economy. He was a part of the team that helped to reestablish the government in South Africa when Nelson Mandela got out of prison. And so he was a teacher and a friend of mine. So unlike some, I actually found light in the entire body of human knowledge, not just in the spiritual stuff, but I started to see light in the liberal arts and in the humanities. And that's when I met Thomas More. Thomas More, I reached out to him via email and established an email relationship, just talking with him and gaining insight. He told me about all of his books, and so I went and got him. A Religion of One's Own, The Magic of Everyday Life, the big one that I can't think of that he really became famous for. And then I discovered his mentorship with one of the pupils, Hillman, of Carl Jung, who was actually a direct student, I believe, of Carl Jung. And so I discovered Hillman's work, The Force of Character, and all of these things that don't seem like that, but my trajectory came that way. And there are explanations even in the Buddhist concept about people who find light just through knowledge. I believe that it's sort of genetically a part of them. And I can tell you stories from childhood connecting that together. I was the one that my mom sent to the door whenever she would get knocks and salespeople would come to the door. And I was the one that had to sit and talk with them and listen to their sales pitch. And as a nerd, the Scholastic Book Fair was like my jam.
Yes.
So I like spazzed out, and it was just books and books and books and books.
And your mom was like, that's too expensive, honey. Like, let's go to the library.
Yes, it was expensive. And I would get in trouble, at the library because I'd be checking out books that weren't appropriate for a 7-year-old, but they're like the textbooks and encyclopedias and books on religion and humanity stuff, and they'd say, okay, you can't read all of this, but we'll give you a shot. And they give me a shot and then quiz me when I come back, and it's like, oh, he did read all of those. So knowledge has kind of been my trajectory. Just not to be boring and nerd like, but
No, I mean, look, we all have our niche, and you found it early, and that's beautiful. And it led you to, self-actualization, realizing exactly what you were meant to be. And so that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it does sound like you found these people, and, it kind of seems like it flowed pretty well for you. In that, like, you were, in the right place at the right time, finding the right mentors, the right teachers, that kind of thing. Did you ever have any times where it was super challenging for you? Did you ever have any like complete doubts about the direction you were taking? Anything that was like, just, the pain points that we go through of like realizing the path that we need to take. First of all, it is a challenging path to realize
Absolutely.
all of the work that's involved, self-work, and the way that we interact with others, finding unconditional love for our worst enemy. Like, all of these things are very difficult to embody. So anyway, I just wonder like what the pain points were along the way too, and like how you overcame your challenges, and like just in a general sense, if there was anything that you were like, gosh, I wish during that point in time in my life, I had access to, this, that would have made it so much easier. Like if it's a community of people who, are knowledge seekers like you, or if you, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. The whole entire process was I can put it together now looking back, but the whole process was painful because I couldn't find anyone like me. It doesn't mean that they didn't exist, but millennials coming of age during the dawn of the millennium, Google was still growing. There was no YouTube for a long time. So, we couldn't just pop into Google to find something. So it was literally scrolling through the index of your favorite book, trying to find an email or an address and sending a letter. And then by the time I became an adult, all that stuff was available, but it's overwhelming and it's a lot. But I was never able to find myself like that. And that was the struggle because I had to sort of move along one step at a time. So I used education as sort of my guide. So as I was growing academically and figuring out career and wanting to teach and all of this other stuff and on the college level, I noticed that spiritually I would find another teacher. So as I would complete whatever path, then there would be another person and then another person and then another person. But it was painful along the way because I could see others around me who seemed to be happy with, they had found a singular teacher to sort of pour into them. I mean, I even had trouble with guidance counselors in high school. Like nobody could seem to just say, hey, Jesse, do this, then that, then that, then this is coming. That wasn't my path. I had to have many teachers. It's like sacred text says, though we have 10,000 instructors, we have not many spiritual parents, according to the mystic Paul. So I had hundreds of teachers, which it seemed for a long time to have me fragmented, but I had to constantly for years remind myself to just trust the process, trust the process. And once I hit my 30s, I really kind of saw my stride, not because of what was going on presently, but because I was able to look back and make connections. And it was a lesson that I am still learning, that, sometimes you have to trust your own inner nature, your own ADHD, if that's where you are, or if you have to have rigid structure in one teacher, then you trust that, because for some of us neurodivergent people, there are no mirrors in the world. There's a few of us here on the planet, and we connect with each other because we have shared and similar interests, but not necessarily an exact match. And that can be problematic at times. You can disrupt systems because of that. You can get in trouble, get kicked out of community because you don't fit.
That's right.
And it can be very, very lonely. But if you do trust the process, a lot of times you end up blazing a trail for others and don't realize there are lots of people who are just like you. You just couldn't see them from where you were.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I want to talk more about neurodivergence. Recording back up. Okay. So the neurodivergence thing, I have because I am neurodivergent and my children are as well. And so it's amazing how we can see things through our children that we don't really realize for ourselves. They can be such mirrors for us, but I've realized like the true gift in being neurodivergent, whether it's ADHD or autistic or what have you. But I mean, I don't know. I just want to hear, like, do you find that, the people that you encounter who you do know are neurodivergent are also like gifted as well? Because I feel like there is some kind of giftedness aspect or component to neurodivergence. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's like Aldous Huxley, the doors of your perception being open. And I'm grateful now that there have been brain studies to show the differences in how we make connections at the neuron level of our brains. But yeah, everyone is the same, but I think because the discipline is so new, neurotypical versus neurodivergence is, kind of a wide thing. But neurodivergent individuals, I mean, you can see patterns where none exist, but you are able to see them in your mind and make connections. The tendency to self-study, self-inform, become autodidactic of in some form. It can be a gift. It can torment you and give you severe anxiety if that pattern recognition aspect of your brain can cause you to be paranoid if you don't manage it, just like anything else. But I mean, you're able to put together things in a way that others might not be able to. So for me, it's been a godsend. It really is a gift. Whereas others might get upset because they don't have executive functioning, like how they say, like everybody else does.
Yeah.
They're not to laugh at jokes the way everybody else does because they don't quite get the nuance. So they might be overly straightforward, which comes across as blunt. All of these things and traits that are associated with people that have ASD type brains or ADHD or whatever the acronym is, there really is a lid for every pot. And it's like, if you can find out as soon as you can, because we find out at different phases of our life, and you find a way to put yourself in an environment where that can be nourished and supported and flourish, you can not only create an amazing life for yourself, but you can help beautify the world. I think neurodivergence is a beautiful thing. I mean, we look around the world and see the diversity in life. I mean, why can't we have diverse connections in our brains?
I just love the way that you present things. It's so clear, it's just, it makes sense. And I don't know. I don't know how you pull everything together into such succinct way of describing it, but it makes perfect sense. And I just wish everyone in the world could, come to this understanding. But that's the goal, right? We're all playing our part to get us there. So
I had different teachers. I had when people say they had a lot of teachers, I had a lot of different teachers. Mark Epstein, I didn't even talk about him. I mean, he was just the trauma of everyday life, going to pieces without falling apart. I mean, psychotherapy without a self, and his work, Michael Egan, embracing the catastrophe of ourselves or partnering with those things that make us upset. I sent an email. Michael Epstein or Michael Egan was, I call him the grandson of Sigmund Freud, because Michael Egan's psychoanalyst was a guy named Wilfred Bion. Wilfred Bion was a direct disciple of Freud. So he was a student of Freud who became a psychoanalyst. He was an Indian guy in the early 1900s who became a psychoanalyst and was powerful. His student was Michael Egan. Michael Egan is about 90 something and still has classes today. And I've taken classes with Dr. Egan, and I sent Dr. Egan a message one time, and he said, I said, hey, I'm glad to be a part of this. He said, Jesse, you're not a part, you're a whole person. And just from Mike Egan and Mark Epstein, just learning just the psychoanalytic nature of words. I just had so many teachers. Rabbi Jonathan David Sachs from afar. He's the one who, the phrase, the wilderness of time, that's where I got that from, that your hopes and dreams aren't lost in the wilderness of time. He was the chief rabbi for the United Synagogues in the UK, was knighted and became Lord Jonathan David Sachs. I mean, just in the garden story, we weren't clothed in skins, big die in Hebrew, but big die or. We were clothed in light because God gave its own substance. That's Rabbi Jonathan David Sachs, and his interpretation of Rabbi Meir from the 2nd century in the Mishnah, the oral tradition. So, I mean, just all of these teachers they racked my brain and just made me think differently. And so if I consolidate all of their voices with my own, it changes what I say and how I look at things. Plus ADHD. So
plus, plus this other physical component that kind of puts me in a certain space to recognize things. Very cool.
So I tell everybody, read far and wide, read outside of your genre. And it change the way you think.
Yes. So much so that you will question everything. Which we should. Oh gosh, I had a question pop up there. Oh yes. So in all of your exploration and reading, I mean, you're so knowledgeable. So, okay, I do have a question about like what it says in the Bible about mystics and not seeking fortune tellers and, things of that nature. However, there's also reports in the Bible of mystical things happening. And so what is your opinion on that? Do you I guess I'll leave it at that. What is your opinion on that?
My opinion is it's all knowledge. It's like the quote from attributed to Jesus. Man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man. So all of these things, we aren't created in the image of God per se. We create God in our own image. The commandments weren't written in stone, 10 commandments, but there was a metaphor to show us that the words of spirit are engraved in nature. These are all human constructs, and whatever construct you need to communicate with the divine, from cards to your lucky sock or rabbit foot so your favorite team can win the Super Bowl. I mean, it's all, they're all tools to open your own mind, no different than people have been doing for centuries to alter their own, brain chemistry. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I wanted to hear your opinion on that because, that's a typical kind of response when you start talking about this stuff with people who haven't really opened their minds to other concepts. And so, I just wanted to hear your take on it. Let's see. And you have a hard stop at 10 or at 11 o'clock?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
But I'd also like to say too, when you're looking at the Bible, you have to also consider that Christianity was a spinoff of the Jewish synagogue, according to John Shelby Spong. And so, I mean, there are cultural prohibitions and things like that. So you're looking at not so much the words of God, but human beings as they interpreted, what they thought God was saying, and the culture that they were establishing, and so on and so forth. So that's like saying, oh, well, in Jesse's house, you have to take your shoes off before you enter the door. But in Susie's house, you can walk around the house with your shoes on. We just give more credence to the Bible because we're used to looking at it religiously and not as a literary piece. So if we really just, open our minds, like you say, then we won't use it as sort of like a legal book saying we can do this and can do that. No different than we look at like Homer's Odyssey or, something like that. So
yeah,
that really, that understanding helps too.
Yeah, no, I love that perspective. Okay, so now I'm going to switch a little bit to the practitioner side. And as we've said, you are the leader of Unity of Birmingham. So you're not necessarily doing like one-on-one energy work, which, a lot of the practitioners I'm talking to are more so, shamans or, Reiki healers or sound work, breath work, those types of things, or angel readings, whatever, what have you. But you do have a practice that you're, trying to develop and build. And so we're just going to talk from that aspect now. All right. So think about the last time you tried to find and connect with new clients, or, trying to get more people into the church. And I don't know if you even call it a church. I don't know. Maybe there's a different name that you call it. Anyway, can you walk me through what that process was like and what challenges you faced?
As a minister, sometimes I forget the title. People say, "Oh, Pastor Jesse or Rev Jesse, the spiritual leader, senior minister," all these titles.
You said just Jesse. Just call me Jesse.
Yeah, I can't keep up sometimes. But I'd say I have the same challenges as other people because, again, I work with words. So when I sit down with people for, I call it pastoral counseling or coaching, but my energy work is just through sitting with people because I'm trained in different forms of psychotherapy, and I was a social worker, both physically and all of that stuff. A lot of that happens there. Plus, all of the other intuitive stuff that they associate with, working in spiritual practice. You just get a good sense of people. So for me, my tools have always been have a seat, sit down, let's talk. And just through words and energy, I can kind of hear behind what people are saying. Neurodivergent people, if you look throughout history, all of the weird folks have always just been neurodivergent people who just had a knack. They couldn't explain how they knew, but they could just hear, they know, they would have impressions, and so on and so forth. You touch their hand, they'd get flashes, and so on and so forth. All of that stuff is very real and very true. For membership and things like that, it's always different because you never know what people need. You can stand up in front of people and speak and have in mind the audience that you're talking to, but your audience is who listens and responds. It's never who you have in your mind. So you can be 25 years old and stand up and speak, and 65-year-olds respond. So I learned early on to don't worry about psychographics or geographics or demographics or any of that other stuff. Whosoever will, let them come, because I have no idea who my message resonates with. And there have been people who've tried to do studies and things like that, which work, but then, like the weather, they change. My message may not have changed, but what resonates with one generation can resonate differently, and so on and so forth, because everything changes and evolves over time. So it's difficult when I try to peek behind the curtain and see and do all of the data stuff to see, okay, this age cohort or this group from this region, this part of the country. And after a while, I just stopped. I just
Yeah.
stopped doing all that because it's like if I focus on that, it pulls me away from the message. And
Mhm.
I'd rather just, cast my net wide and whosoever will let them come. From a social media marketing standpoint, I'm sure it probably drives people crazy. But I don't have that executive functioning literal structure in some areas because from where I stand, it doesn't work. I'm a lot less corporate. For individuals who that resonates with, that's their world. But my wheelhouse is in people. It really is. Put me in front of people and then let's see. And the ones who stay, it resonates with, and the ones who it doesn't resonate with, they leave, but they come back. So, it's you can't predict people because it really a lot of times has nothing to do with you. They
Yeah.
have life and things and stuff. So they know where to find you. They'll be back. You
Yeah.
know, let
Yeah.
people go.
Yeah. So you just focus on your craft and
Yeah, that's
yeah,
it.
delivering what your gift is. And then,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Because the whole structure of membership and all that stuff is changing. I mean, hey, listen, Netflix is what, $7.99 a month. So trying to get people to join a community and become members with what you're offering, you almost offer it for free anyway, minus the traditional forms of burial and things like that. And society is changing because we have different needs and our access is different. Culture is changing. We're being influenced by entertainment. So it really can be a whole smorgasbord of things, which is why, like you said, I focus on my craft and whoever shows up online and whoever's in the building, I really do my best to speak to and to cast my net as wide as I can for others who will come back and listen, and things like that. And you just keep the light on. That's all you can do because you really never know who might need what you have to offer and when they might walk through the door.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Do you do any kind of like behind the scenes manifestation or affirmations or those kind of things? I mean, I'm sure you pray just, for it to develop in the way that it, is meant to develop, but
Absolutely. My affirmations are very, straightforward and similar to what you were saying. Like one of my teachers, Dr. Ponder, and her son, Richard Thoreau, who's a personal mentor, kind of like a dad to me. Just affirmations and what he would call your wheel of fortune from the Ponder teaching. You have to have something that you focus on because whatever door you knock on is the one that opens. So my focus has always been not on a particular age or race or cohort group of people. It's been to what Seth Godin says: people like us do things like this. And it's people who this message resonates with. And I try to stay in the middle so that there's enough for people who've been in it for a while and it doesn't deter new people who are coming into it. If you get me one-on-one and you want to know all the mystical stuff, we can go there, but
yeah.
usually publicly, I try to stay right in the middle so that everyone has enough, to where no one is left behind.
Yeah, yeah. You can geek out with the people who are ready to geek out, but
Yeah, but
yeah, but
absolutely. These affirmations and all of that stuff, it's not just for me, sort of a rubbing a jar so that a genie will pop out, but
yeah.
it's really for my own personal transformation so that holistically, because ministry might be the traditional podium thing or the one-on-one thing, or ministry could just be you're at the gas station and they remember seeing your car at the church and they decided to stop in because they saw you at the gas station. You never know. Once you touch certain things, you become almost a brand for it. So you never know when people find you or what they hear you say that you didn't say and all of that other stuff. So my affirmations tend to be, whoever this message is for, let them hear it, and anything that's positive, because unity is all about affirmative prayer, positive prayer. So instead of praying to this, deity that sits in the sky and looks down low, I find God within. I see the presence of God in nature, and I work to come in harmony with that which already is, so that it can create, room, and I'm just the vessel.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I know we're coming up on time, but I could literally talk to you for days straight.